I was going to wear my apron for this, but I decided not to. I've got something for you to watch before we talk.
So for the homemakers. Hey, this one for the homemakers.
Okay, everybody, I have to talk about this. I'm so shocked at what I've just seen.
Cooking is not only important for a homemaker, but is also important for family life in general.
Hey, dancing through a homemaker.
Just wet your steel wool and give it a good scrubbing.
Okay, everybody, I have to talk about this. I'm so shocked at what I've just seen. She has no idea how dangerous what she's doing is.
Hey, this one for the homemakers.
Back to the 1950s.
For the homemakers.
By saying that she enjoys staying home and
For the homemakers.
cooking
For the homemakers.
and cleaning and
For the homemakers.
looking after her kid.
You are doing yourself and your family a huge favor.
You know what? I've changed my mind. I'm going to put on my apron. We're going to talk about tradwives, homemakers, housewives, and where on earth do working women fit into this picture? I came across the tradwife trend recently. First time I saw it, I saw a bunch of people mad about it. Just angry, beyond words angry. Well, they weren't beyond words. They had a lot to say about this. Basically, what it is that pretty blonde that you saw in the video who looks quite a bit like Marilyn Monroe. I think she's the one who came up with the term tradwife. And what she means by it is that she and her husband decided that she'd stay home and she gets herself dolled up every day in a pretty dress and her hair and everything. She cleans the home. She cooks. She makes things nice for her husband. She makes sure that she makes meals that he enjoys when he comes home. She is traditional in that she's submissive to her husband. And before we go one word past that, let's talk about what submissive is. I found a good article about what Christian women mean when they say they're being submissive to their husband. It debunks some myths. So let's go over here and look at this. 8 myths about submission. I will put the link to the article in the description below. First of all, wife submission is not to men in general. It's really to Christ. Submission does not mean that a wife is inferior to her husband. Check that out. That's not what it means. Submission doesn't mean that a wife is subject to a life of forced compliance. That is a completely different thing. I had some friends that lived that type of life. Their husbands really wouldn't let them leave the house. They didn't work because their husband wouldn't allow it. He didn't give them any money. They were verbally abusive to their wives. Not like that. Submission doesn't mean that they live a slavish, grovelous, subservience life. Submission doesn't minimize a wife into mindlessness. Submission doesn't mean that husbands are already right. That's right. The husband is not God. Submission never requires that a wife follows her husband into sin. Finally, a wife's submission never gives license to her husband to abuse her. And amen to that. Amen to that. Like I just mentioned, I've had a few of my friends whose husband believed those crazy things. Pretty much locked him up, didn't give him any money, were definitely verbally abusive, and in a couple cases they were physically abusive. So that's not it. We're not talking about that. Get that out of your mind, please. So this girl chose this traditional marriage life in her view, which many Christians have the same belief. And she's happy, her husband's happy, they get along just great. I'm sure that when she has children, she'll be a wonderful mother. It made me start thinking about the terms of homemaker and housewife. And I realized I have a few things to say about that. Let's look at some real definitions of these terms. Dictionary.com says that a homemaker is a person who spends their time looking after home and doing housework rather than being employed outside the home. Typically applied to a woman. Well, I take a little bit of exception to that, and I'll tell you why here in a minute. What is considered a homemaker? A person who manages the household of their own family, especially as a principal occupation. Person employed to manage a household and to do household chores for others. Okay, I'll tell you why that bothers me. They're saying there that the only women who can be a homemaker are those who are not employed elsewhere. So, in other words, someone who's working in a job, even if they really care about their home, is not a homemaker. And I don't believe that. Let's go back to the definitions. I'll tell you why that's weird to me. I was born in 1957. And if you do the math, that means I'm 65. Unlike the people who are younger than me that are having this argument, I actually remember this, how it went down, at least where I lived. I can't speak to the whole world and the whole United States. I can speak to how I grew up, which was really a traditional small town in the middle of Utah. So my mother was a traditional homemaker in that she took care of the house and the home and the kids. And my dad earned the living, and he came home and mom had a really good dinner for him, the things he liked. He would read the paper and we'd watch TV, and mom would help us with the homework. My mom and my dad both expected it to happen that way because that's how their home lives were with their parents and their grandparents, and it went back far and far. But you know what? That does not mean that those women did not work ever. During the Depression, my grandmother did anything she could to earn some extra money. One time she worked in a movie theater that was in her little town, and she made mattresses and she did all kinds of things to earn money because they pitched in. And it was after World War II that things got better. Grandpa was able to make enough money with the farm and his running the cows around that she didn't have to. And she loved to take care of her home, and she loved to clean it. It was her hobby. And she quilted, and she was the best cook ever, and she loved her kids and her grandkids, and she was ideal. My other grandmother, same thing. She loved it. My grandpa was in World War I. She worked when he came home, and he went to work in the garage that they owned. It was a car dealership, and she was able to stay home and have children and take care of her family. And they were both just as happy as they could be. When I was 12, my parents bought a department store, and it took everybody pitching in to run that thing. And my mom was working more than full time. And I remember my brother and I being upset with her for a little while because we wanted her to be home. We liked her being home, but we adjusted to it. I helped. I did a lot of the cleaning and baking, and we all pitched in and did it together, and everything was fine. But I still had this really traditional picture of what a marriage was like. So when my husband got married, I expected to be doing all the cooking and cleaning, because even if mom was working, she was still doing that. She was a homemaker. My mother was not a housewife, by the way. She did not like the term "we are living in a house." She would really correct us. We live in a home. And I'm a homemaker. To us, the housewife, maybe be those women on TV, maybe they were housewives. The women I knew were homemakers. So if you're out there and you're offended and you think housewife, and how could you be slamming that? I'm just giving you that in the terms of what I grew up with. But because housewife at that particular time was it was a term that was looked down, where homemaker was more an elevated term. Housewife was more like something you were paid. And then we had a bad connotation on it because women truly did not get paid fairly. And one of my first jobs, it was at a savings and loan, and the women didn't get paid even close to what they should have in comparison to the man. And the president of the company said one time, "Well, you're just earning pin money." Oh, no, we weren't. We were earning the money to live. Please. I'm so glad that went away. The women that are working today don't know. They are getting paid better on the back of women my age. So just know that. That was a real struggle to get so we were paid more fairly. And that ability to be paid more fairly has increased over time. There was this idea, what's a housewife? Or, they're not making a lot of money and they're not doing anything valuable. Where the women I knew was like, no, man, I'm a homemaker. So, this is bigger. This is a mission. You can just kind of keep that in context, right? When I got married to my husband, I just thought, I'm going to do everything my mother did. We were only married 2 weeks. We had a big fight because he had cleaned the refrigerator. I thought he was telling me I wasn't doing a good job as his wife. But he was like, What? It needed to be cleaned, so I cleaned it. I had no trouble adjusting to his way of thinking. I remember one time my mother came over and my husband was in the kitchen mopping the floor, and she got so upset. She said, "He's going to leave you. He's going to leave you." And I said, "No, he's not. I didn't make him do that. I didn't even ask him to do that. That was his own idea." Oh, she just had such a hard time with that because my father and my grandfather never would. And my mother and my grandmothers were just perfectly fine with that. But my mother was not fine with me not doing it. She's adjusted. She's lived with us for over 10 years. And she thinks my husband's just the best thing that ever came along. And we work together as a team. We've had some times when I was able to just be full-time and be a homemaker. And he earned the living. But then it became really quickly apparent to us that if I didn't work, we would starve. This was not a budgeting matter because I was excellent at budgeting. I remember one day sitting on my couch and I was recovering from some medical drama, and the thought came to me, if you don't work, your kids can't go to the dentist. And I knew it was true. It was kind of a sad moment because I didn't want to give that up. Being home with the kids, I really liked it. But I knew it was right, so I got a job and I worked from then on. Gosh, that was 1999. So a long time because I have just barely retired. But I tell you what, I was working hard, and I had some kind of big responsible jobs there at the end. But I was always a homemaker. Always a homemaker. We're going to go back to these definitions because I just want you to see this. A tradwife is a woman who believes in traditional sex roles and traditional marriage. Many tradwives believe that a woman does not lose rights by choosing to take her traditional role in marriage. Well, I can tell you what, my mother and grandmothers were traditional wives, but they hadn't lost any rights at all. They all had very strong opinions. They were very loving and kind to their husbands and their children, and we just loved them to pieces, but they all had very strong opinions. They were really in control of what happened in their homes because, you know, it was their domain. They didn't feel like they'd lost anything. Okay, this is kind of a weird thing to me. So I started researching homemaking versus housewife plus tradwife, and I got to show you this. I did a search with something called Google Trends where you can see what the search volume is on different terms, just so you can get an idea of who's looking for what. Gives you kind of the mood. When you pull up housewife, look at all these things that people are just searching with. The Tipsy Housewife, Diary of a Mad Housewife, Desperate Housewives, the new OC Housewife. I wouldn't say that those things are exactly complimentary to being a housewife, would you? I don't really like the housewife term because maybe at one point it had a really good meaning. Maybe in Leave It to Beaver and Fathers Knows Best, they were called housewives. I don't remember. But it certainly is not a great thing right now, and maybe the fact that this girl has called herself a tradwife? I don't know. That's something for us to think about. Let's go on. There are all these big arguments on the internet about this. I looked up some articles and I thought this was just strange. This article is trying to draw a crazy line between being a traditional wife, or I'm going to say a homemaker, and being sexist and racist, because the era when there were more traditional wives was in an era where women weren't being paid as much and there were plenty of racists around. Well, that's just silly. They're not related, people. They're not related. And there have been traditional homemakers or wives through all of mankind history. And there have been traditional wives all the time since there. It has an unbroken line. There have always been traditional wives and mothers. Always. What's different now is we've got social media and it has become a trend. And I think these women who made it a trend, they just wanted to stick up for what they were doing. But this is not news. And just because someone or 2022 wanted to be a traditional wife does not mean that their mindset is in this sexist or racist mindset. It's just not related any more than the pine tree outside my backyard is related to my car. They are objects, but they exist in my environment, but they are two different things. I just think there's so much going on in the world. It's just crazy town, right? It's just crazy town. And who can blame a woman, at least to me? I mean, really, I totally understand any young woman who says, I don't want to have to deal with that stuff my mom dealt with. Because if you are a mother and you're raising your kids and you're having to work, your brain, your soul is always split in half. I mean, sometimes women don't have to work. That's the way it is. But if they're like me, I had to work. So my mind and my soul and my heart was always split in half. When I was in the workplace, I was working hard and doing my very best job for my employer, taking great pride in that. But there was always a big part of me that was at home, that was worrying about my kid, that was feeling guilty that I couldn't be there with my kids. And there was always a part of me that was kind of jealous of the women I knew who could be at home, didn't have to be torn in half by that. But yet, I loved my jobs and I really liked feeling like I was being useful, kept us financially solvent. I did a lot of good things, and then I did the very best job I knew how with my kids, and my husband and I, we're a team. We fill in the gaps each other has. And so there were certain responsibilities with the house, the kids that he picked up, and there are things that I did for our family. Together, we made a team, and to me, that's the way it should be. But I never, ever, ever stop considering myself a homemaker. So we've got this Tradwife promote a lifestyle that evokes the 1950s, but their nostalgia is not without controversy. Okay. I'm feeling like some political commentator here. I'm not intending to be. It's just I'm passionate about this. There have always been traditional wives. There have always been traditional mothers. This is not a new phenomena, but social media is. And you had some really cute girls, and they were able to make really cute videos and things of themselves, which, by the way, is not a traditional thing to do. Some woman in the 1950s or the 70s or the 80s or the 90s who was living this traditional life could not do that and go out and proclaim on the internet, oh, look at me, I'm a traditional wife. I made this new trend. No, this is not new. But I'll tell you what was new is in the 1970s and the 80s, there was this big push of certain types of women pushing women out into the workforce with the idea, if you don't go do this, you're letting all women down. If you don't do this, we have to fight for equal pay and all of this stuff. And when I got married, and this is true, medical insurance did not cover pregnancy. We had to buy 2 pieces of insurance, one for medical and one for pregnancy. That was horrific. That should not have happened. And I remember so well when there was a federal law that was passed that said, insurance companies, you have to include pregnancy too. So there are some really good things that have happened for women over the years, and women have done that for other women. I really, honestly, I think there were less arguments between women who were working and women who were home then than there are now. And the only thing that has changed is social media. There have always been women who worked, and there have always been women who stayed home. The women who worked always cared about their children in their home in the same way they did as when they were home. Dictionary.com, you have it wrong. You just have it wrong. I was trying to search working women as homemakers just to see what come up. And I looked, there were no articles, so I can't show you a list of that. These are the images. We've got traditional women here, 1950s women. So only homemaker. I mean, do you see the problem with that? Is it just me that I look at and I go, there's a problem here? That these are the images that I could bring up with a working woman as a homemaker. We just live in a crazy mixed up world. And so I think that's why this is a good example of why the world says housewife or tradwives or homemakers, and they just take working women out of it because you've got to be one or the other. And I say, no, you don't. Now I have a really good video, just a beginning of a video by a girl, a YouTuber named Madisun Gray. And I'm going to link to her channel below, and I hope you go check her out. I'm just going to show you a little bit of the beginning because it goes so well with what I'm talking about. And I hope you go watch it and you subscribe to it and comment and say, Roseanne Paxman, who you do not know at all, has just pointed me to your channel. So, and while we're subscribing to things and liking things, why don't you subscribe to me? This is a homemaking channel, Roseanne Paxman's Home. I talk about all things to do with home and homemaking, which is why I care about this so much. And give it a like. Okay, let's look at Madisun's video here.
We are all homemakers. Yet it seems fewer and fewer people are celebrating this sacred art. I think homemaking is about creating a welcoming, cozy, safe place to be.
I just love that. Homemaking is about creating a cozy, inviting, warm, wonderful place to be. Now, we didn't say you have to work or you have to stay home to do that. And it's true. To me, that's true. That's what homemaking's all about. Let's watch a little bit more of this video.
And I think you can do this in an apartment, on a homestead, even in a tent, or in a house in the suburbs. I think when we strip away the distracting excess, the distraction of just too much and too many things going on, I think these home skills come natural to all of us.
I really love the fact that she points out that it doesn't matter what kind of building that you live in. You can create a home there. It's about getting rid of the distractions that take you away from the skills that make you a homemaker. And to me, those skills would be to maybe decorating your home, to cooking and cleaning, and if you have kids, taking care of your kids and loving them. If you're married, to create a good relationship with your spouse. It's really anything that happens on your property. I was going to say within your walls, but to me, it's the property, because my garden and my yard is certainly part of my home. So it's anything that I can do as a human, I'm going to say homemaker, that will allow me to make a better, cozier, warmer life for my family and for myself. I'd love to know what you think. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye.